Congratulations to both teams for making it to the semifinals of the 2018 National Challenge Debate League Tournament Champions. Really great round. It is a 5-0 decision for the affirmative. Anyone want to go first? I can. I'll try to be quick. I vote on the second advantage. I think that the general strategic choice of the negative in terms of the second advantage just isn't like super well done in this round. Like I think that these non-unique analyses, first of all, like aren't super strategic since they are only defensive. But I also think that the MO analysis isn't sufficiently interacting with the way in which the MG extends its argumentation, as well as the new arguments that are made. Right? I think there's framing in the MG and extensions of the arguments as to why the U.S. is perceived as funding an organization or like a nation that Israel sees as like a terrorist organization or a terrorist nation, and there's a lot of bombings near Israel, which means there's a specific risk they need to be able to combat, which means that there is like a large propensity for them to be not happy with the U.S. right now. Additionally, articulation as to why like Trump is specifically someone like that not who is not happy with. You all have analysis as to why like Trump is also conservative, therefore ideologically may agree with him, but I don't know how this interacts with the question of specifically the material condition of like the bombings that are happening and that being specifically funded by the U.S. And so I think they give them access to a significant portion of advantage too. In a world in which they give them access to advantage too, and specifically the analysis that a first strike is inevitable in the world of the status quo, I also do have, I think this will be clear in the MG, but I do have analysis in the MG as to why this triggers all the impacts of the disadvantage, which means that in a world in which I give them access to advantage too, even if I give you access to the disadvantage, I don't think that means all that much, where your disadvantage defends the quo, these impacts are inevitable, there's like only a risk the app's able to resolve. On this kind of like transition war, kind of like transition regime argument that's in the first advantage, I do have the argument in the MG that this is an explanation of like the way in which the status quo functions. I don't have it to terrorist organizations for what it's worth. I think it's the argument that a way in which I have in the MG is that like the military is perpetuating this. So you all should be like clear about like how you're standing against the PMR. But I think this is sufficient for people to buy that there's like significant defense on this analysis. But even still, I think the impact comparison between this impact turn or this argument isn't done well enough with the advantage 2. And so I don't really know how to interact those impacts. I think that advantage 2 probably has a clearer internal link story and also just has like is more likely to outweigh on magnitude just based off of the way in which they've gone for it. I think they have an extinction impact tag there somewhere. In terms of the disadvantage, I also think they're winning defensive arguments. I think you all misunderstand this argument that's being made on the political situation in Saudi Arabia. I don't think that your extension of the argument that there is like assassination attempts right now interacts with it, because it's a question of whether or not there are alternate reasons as to why the politics disadvantage kind of scenario would have been triggered, right? The argument is just that any degree of like something being done that would like trigger some kind of like unrest is sufficient to trigger the disadvantage. Then I think that they're probably winning the uniqueness question that, yeah. But regardless, I also think if they win advantage 2, the dissent doesn't matter all that much, and so that's why I ended up voting.
I mostly see the same round the same way. I think advantage 2 is they're just winning advantage 2 for the most part for the same reason why Trevor said so. Even if I grant the negative a little bit access to the Saudi Arabia disadvantage, I still think the affirmative has an external like impact area that they can access, i.e. dehumanization, that the negative can't really access because of the conceded arguments about transition wars. Probably means that it's still a reason why I can prefer the affirmative, given the fact that best case scenario, y'all have a link differential in terms of new war. Yeah, I think that's it.
Sure, I'll go. The MG reads first strike's inevitable. I think that if first strike's inevitable, then we probably should do something. But also, combined with the uniqueness that the app is reading, that the dissat is basically, there's no unique reason why the dissat should have already happened if there was already the $1 million trade, whatever they said. That should have already triggered Camp David Accords, which means that there's no risk that the dissat happens, or it should have already happened, which means that if there's a risk that they avoid the first strike that's happening already inevitably, then I vote there. Secondarily, I do want to talk about this paradox argument for just a second. First off, calculus already solved your paradox, so I don't know why you keep reading it. Second of all, I need an impact if you're going to read this kind of argument again. Like, if you're going to read this, like, Holocaust denial argument, it needs an impact of why Holocaust denial is particularly bad. Like, I get why it's bad, but, just like hey, don't revise history. Like, that's probably a bad thing, like, recauses, those kind of things, future genocide kind of things. And also, especially if you're going to make it an IVI. I would have just voted on an IVI if it had an impact.
Second advantage largely held for me too. I didn't think the reputation that Trump and Netanyahu are buds was too convincing. The Saudi Arabia piece, I thought that the affirmative did a really good job explaining that the United States still provides much help to Saudi Arabia, and thus relations continue to be solid.
I don't really have anything to add. I voted on this second advantage as well. So you. Finals will also be in here. Finalists, unfortunately, are only trying to